are finding their seats. Brilliant. We're ahead of schedule. Well done, Tim. Okay, so my name is Rasmus Sanko, and I'm here to talk about delivering data-driven experiences with a human touch, or by delivering UX methodologies as well. I come from human-computer sociology back in the day. I've been in this industry for 15, 20 years, evolving with it, going from tedious usability testing over information architecture to UX design, to service design, and now customer experience, which kind of encompasses the whole thing. I manage our brilliant UX design teams here at Charlie Tango. And I'm very excited to show you a little bit of what we're working with here. So remember 7 or 8 years ago, whenever a company or an organization was faced with a problem, there was like one solution to solve it. Whatever the challenge might be, we all ended up in one solution. And there was an app, right? And it just solved everything. But obviously, we progressed as an industry. We've become more mature. We now know that the answer is not as simple as just getting an app. So now when a company or organization are faced with a problem, we now have the perfect solution for it. And that's a chatbot, right? It solves everything. We can fire half of our crew and just like live off the surplus. So we actually jump on board and like hurtling away to start building all these chatbots, because chatbots are brilliant. It's a brilliant design pattern. You can do so much with it. But as we were looking around in the industry, we saw many of these chatbots were actually failing. And as we were sliding down the mountain, it kind of dawned on us that we were so in love with the beautiful thing at the end of the design that we actually forgot to go back and actually look at what problem it actually needed to solve. So not only doing the thing right, like doing the beautiful chatbot, but actually also kind of supporting it with what it needs. So many times we were met with this ask. So we need a personalized chatbot to solve our problems, and brilliant. But again, as I just said, all the stuff that needs to happen before this chatbot is actually able to say anything intelligent is actually quite a big undertaking. And it's about turning data into action and going from a point where you have the data available, that you are able to take it to action. But what happens in between is actually that data needs to be found, structured, nourished, and turned into information. And from that information, you then derive insights. What are the patterns that we're seeing, and what can it actually tell us? And from that insight, you're then able to decide what the appropriate action should be. But it's not an easy task. There are so many obstacles in your organization, in your culture, in your the people that you have in your organization that can prove to this be really hard. One of the biggest problems that we see often is that the data available actually doesn't reflect the complexity of the user experience. So we might have all the customer data, we might have all the use data, but we don't actually see when specific events occur. They're not kind of mapped and not saved. So for us, we then start in kind of in a low-res place that doesn't give us the true picture. Then many of our clients and many of the big companies and industries rely on mainframe or big databases that then spew out data just once a day or once a month, and also that is kind of taking time out, so that we're not able to work in real time or just like one-on-one with the data. And that data, once available, if available, is then very often then presented in just ad hoc reports, so just like standalone reports one month by month, or maybe even yearly, which also isn't very operative. And because of those kind of faulty reports or non-sufficient insights, we're then not able to actually do the informed decisions that would then lead to actions. And the actions that we take are then not feedbacked, looped, or measured correctly, so we don't actually know what's happening. So all of this could take a year, it could take a day, could take months, but there are these obstacles along the way that we need to take care of if we want it to go really smooth. And what we're working towards is this continuous intelligent cycle where the feedback loop is just feeding itself and kind of nurturing itself. So you go from data straight into information, insights that then drive decisions, then turn to action, then you measure that action to drive new data, and the wheel goes on and on. So if we look out into the world, some people are getting really good at this. Dec13 and MasterCard in Sweden has launched a credit card that not only measures your spending, but also your CO2 emissions, and enables you actually to compensate to buy into specific green projects.
In 2018, the United Nations released an urgent report emphasizing the need to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 in order to avoid an irreversible climate crisis. The average consumer in Sweden causes around 10 tons of carbon emissions each year, of which 60% is linked to consumption. Later in 2018, Dec13, a Swedish fintech, took on the challenge and launched Do, a mobile banking service for everyday climate action. The Do app is connected to a credit card that enables users to track and measure their carbon footprint from each purchase and to compensate for its impact day by day.
All right, so by aggregating data not only from your bank account and your core systems, they're actually able to help you manage your guilty conscience and saving the world. So data is not only saving the planet, it could also save individual people. A couple of years ago, Apple introduced the ability to scan the electrical pulses that the heart gives out to derive an EKG. So they can actually predict once you're in the danger zone of something happening. And let's do that.
On this particular day, I finally got up and I was flying above the water. I got quite a ways out there and it ended in a spectacular crash.
I'm trying to figure out why it would make sense for a 13-year-old to need a watch like this. Jim's like, this is going to give him an edge and be able to train and get ready for his sports.
I was on my way home with my son Parker. At the time, he was 9 months old.
There was one morning I had these incredible heart pains and I was short of breath and we were walking up this hill. My watch just kept dinging at me and it was like, you have elevated heart rate. What's going on? I'm like, I'm just walking, That heart rate alert just kept going off and off. And I was like, okay, this isn't normal,
So obviously the potential in this data cycle is immense and huge. But how do we actually work with it? How do you actually set it up? How do you come across all the different stages? And that brings kind of the user-centered design methodology and craft together with the data science craft. And I remember the first time I met our data science team here at Intermedia. They were so exotic, right? They could do math. They saw all these predictions and stuff. So I was completely in love, and I knew there was something really special going on. But to be completely honest, it was actually kind of a rough start that we had because we were kind of waiting on each other to. The UX team wanted them to kind of come with data so we could do cool shit, and they were waiting on us to say what data they should find. So we were kind of waiting on each other and seeing each other off. So it's a kind of a rough patch. But then suddenly we started kind of just experimenting and trying to do stuff. And we kind of got a closer look into analytics and dynamics and stuff like that. And with the help of the data science team, we're kind of looking at, okay, so even though the progression of an app, saying, okay, so we have almost 200,000 users. That's great. That's brilliant. Yeah, but if you actually like do the numbers, you can see that people actually using the app is only like one guy in Herning. So it dawned on us. Okay, wow! If we expand this data field, it's really potential, and it's beautiful. What we can actually do. So it's just a lot of love right now. So we started figuring out, okay, so how can we actually get a common vocabulary? How can we work across our differences and use them to the best? So we started framing this continuous intelligence cycle and thinking, okay, it's obvious that we are talking about the same thing, but we're talking about it from different vantage points. So this is where the IT or tech would start. We have our engagement layer. That's our interfaces. That's the phone center, the call center. That's the app, the websites, kind of all the touch points that an organization have. And that data goes into the system of records, the big mainframes, the big core systems, and like the huge machines, right? But as we talked about just a couple of slides ago, it's actually really hard to get any actionable data out of that. So to have the organization then collect that data into a data platform, a data lake, or a mesh of lakes to have it actionable. And that means that we're then able to learn from that data and produce insights. And those insights can then be like a BI dashboard or reports or maybe some insights that would inform actions, right? So from that insight, we're able to decide what's the right thing to do when we understand the problem. So what we then did was to kind of figure out, how do we actually talk about this? How do we get together and figure this out? And we kind of started with a methodology called How Might We? So how might we would then be the business case. That would be the problem to solve, right? So how might we actually prevent something? By doing what? How might we actually prevent something by doing something, right? But before we could do something, we needed to know something, right? So how might we prevent something by doing this, by knowing this? And to know that, we need to see this, right? And breaking it up into these molecules or atoms actually gave us a vocabulary, because the dialogues you have down here are not the same as you have at the top. It's the same topic, but it's definitely on a different level. So for a case, let's say, how might we actually provide fast and personalized service to our customers and reduce the number of lost calls in our contact center? It doesn't have to be, science fiction. It can be problems like that. By doing what? Okay, well, by showing the answers of the most frequently asked questions on our website, that could take some of the calls off. By doing the chatbot, and because we have the data and we now know what they're talking about, we can actually do, a viable chatbot. And maybe provide an expert system for caseworkers that would also, show the cases that people are talking about. If, over the year, is it passport renewals? Is it like health insurance, stuff like that? And by knowing what? Well, we can only display these things, and we only know what to do if we know what the customers are asking for, and we know what their preferred communication channels are. And by seeing what? Well, by seeing experience layer analytics, like mapping the whole experience layer, the transcribed phone call, actually know what the people are talking about. If there's 100,000 people calling in, transcribing those calls gives us an immense amount of data and information. Going through their emails and looking into customer demographics. So by knowing this, we're able to do that, which I think is really, it's actually really fun, and it was kind of the key that got us going really fast. Someone who does this really, really well is Uber. Uber has obviously a huge interest in safety on the road. So Uber is kind of every day giving you a daily briefing on how your driving went. You can see how many smooth brakes were 33 out of 44. That's nice. How many smooth accelerations. So kind of just peering, drivers into kind of this this is a good way to get around the city. This is a nice way. But also even more advanced, they're able to actually stop the drivers before they get into an accident. So by actually knowing, by recognizing the pattern that goes in like 3 or 4 days before something bad happens, they can then trace back and say, okay, you're actually now following those patterns, right? So obviously that's the amount of hours you've been driving, but they can also track GPS and accelerometer in your phone, so they can see if you all of a sudden are driving irregularly or you are doing stuff that you're not usually doing. And then they're able to actually say, okay, you should take a break, right? So so if we map it to the how might we prevent accidents? By telling our drivers that they're heading towards an accident, by knowing when the drivers are likely to crash and recognizing that, and using GPS accelerometers and irregular driving styles, hours of day and even years. So that's the intelligent cycle going at seconds, right? So they're also able to detect when the phone are moving, right? So if you detach your phone from your dashboard, obviously an alarm goes off and say, hey, don't do that, because that's really dangerous. They monitor speed limit, make sure that you don't speed. And also, they now just launched this thing where they now map all the bicycle lanes. So whenever you as a driver are pulling up to a destination that has a bicycle lane, they then warn the driver to warn the passenger. Again, keeping everybody safe. So becoming a data-driven organization is actually really hard. It's about insight, adoption, culture. You go from being insight averse, that actually kind of, don't tell us what we already know, we're doing fine, don't worry about that, to become insight aware. We need to use data, but we kind of don't know how. And then inside using that, we try to use data. We do kind of the reports we're following, we're tracking, but definitely we have room for improvements. And then actually sorry. Oh yeah, I lost it. Right. And insights driven, where all the data actually drives all the decision and confirms every action we take. So not going in blind and not going on a hunch, but actually like using the data to derive the actions and then measuring on that action to see where to follow up and to change. So it's also about insight creation. How are your abilities to actually create the insights that you need? The least maturity you can be is kind of the subjective, kind of based on intuition and anecdotal evidence. So yeah, usually they're going to call about this, or yeah, I have a gut feeling that this is happening, right? Then you have your descriptive, kind of focusing on what happened, kind of track, this is actually the events that we see happening, and we have a good idea on what's going on. And then to predictive, so I say, okay, so let's see, based on what we know happened and based on all the trends that we have, what is it that we think are likely to happen? And then the final kind of maturity level is then prescriptive. This is when we can actually, with the data and with the information that we have, change what's about to happen. And then finally, it's about insight deployment. This is static. Insight deployment, AI models are manually deployed and monitored and updated. That means that you're actually like sitting and hard coding and creating them, and a lot of people are involved with it. The manual insight the problems, AI models are manually deployed, monitored and updated, and a lot of human interaction. They're kind of monitored and make sure that they work. And then the last, and you could be automated, sorry. So the AI models are actually kind of looking into themselves, but doing fine. And then the very last one is autonomous. And this is where the AI models are continuously deployed and self-monitoring and self-healing. And this is Google and Facebook and kind of Netflix level. So I would say that, I mean, we haven't reached this level of maturity with any of our clients, but we're definitely working on it. And one last story, as Tim also said, that the consequences or the abilities of this continuous intelligence cycle are really big. And to go to see where someone has taken it to the extreme, we can go to China and check that out.
The Chinese government can peer into the two dominant payment systems, Alipay and WeChat, as it sees fit. It's already started tracking behavior as part of a plan to rank citizens and measure how good and obedient they are. The tech revolution may have brought prosperity to Shenzhen, but it's also brought more and more insidious intrusions into people's lives. To dig deeper into life under the Chinese deep state, I've assembled a team of extraordinary foreigners who work at tech startups in Shenzhen. Hopefully a few beers will encourage them to open up about their thought crimes.
Living in a very tightly regulated communist country, does that bother you, or you don't care?
Like the presumption, at least that I got before I came from Australia, you're sort of like moving into sort of like a militarized state kind of thing. Like things are gonna be really intense. But like, you take a beer, you just like walk down the road, hang out in the park, fine.
Yeah.
Do that back in my hometown, Australia, like straight to the cop house.
Yeah.
Like,
But then, play spike ball on the grass, and then all of a sudden, the cops come and stop
Well, you jaywalked and you had facial recognition.
Craziest thing, I actually got this. Yeah, so I was jaywalking in Nanshan, and all of a sudden I got a fine to my WeChat.
Was it instant?
It was about 20 seconds after, I guess. And I had money in my balance, it just went straight out. And this is just the most incredible thing. It just came straight out.
Didn't even authorize
And
it.
that was incredible.
That's crazy.
So this guy got a fine like instantly doing something wrong, and that's where you see kind of the intelligence cycle going really, really fast. And obviously that's because the Chinese government has all the system of records that they need, and they have access to everything, and they're obviously available to put a lot of people into crunches those numbers and setting up the machines. But for us in this more local context in Denmark, I hope that you kind of, for us, this was a key that kind of unlocked the potential of like the two different cultures working together. And I think by having a more nuanced dialogue in the different stages of these systems being setting up, I think we're able to reach something really, really interesting. Thank you.
That's me now. Hi. Thank you, Rasmus. One note. I think Rasmus' presentation showed so many good reasons why we should have Uber in Denmark. I just don't know why we don't have it. All right. So for those who don't know me, which probably is most of you, I'm Alberto. I'm Italian. I'm 31. I work as head of design here at Charlie Tango. I've been in Denmark 5 years. I worked in another company before doing digital product and design systems. Before coming to Denmark, I've been in London. I worked there in branding creativity, a small studio, 15 people. And before that, I studied motion graphics. Before that, I studied industrial design. And before that, I lived 22 and a half years in my hometown. Today I've been asked to talk a little bit about the trends and things happening. I wasn't really sure whether orienting my talk towards the past, like the current trends, or the ones that I see coming. So I kind of done a mashup of both. No big reveals, I'm going straight to them. Some have been mentioned by Tim before. I read few reports from places and companies working with huge clients, very smart designers writing them. But these four are the ones that sort of caught my attention the most. There's a lot of focus into this, transparency, aligning tech with human, this post-truth concept, which Tim explained, so I don't have to re-explain, and trust, giving trust. Like, wouldn't it be nice to give this half an hour or part of it to sort of look into why we're getting to this? Why is this becoming so trendy? And most of all, like, I've also was thinking, is this trendy or is a trend? Because in my Italian, English, Danish vocabulary, a trend is something that happens and then goes away, right? So it's I don't know, like the mullet haircut or something like that. Just comes, everybody has it, and then go. Or it's trendy, meaning that has always been there, but now it's becoming relevant to talk about it. Well, usual trick of going back to the past. As you can see from my graph, there has been a lot of new devices up until now. Not only phones, you know, smart everything, smart homes, smart thermostats, smart everything. What that meant for my job as a designer mainly was, you know, my focus shifted from being very much on the look and feel and the appeal of a solution into how it actually works, so how people use it, right? And since, again, I'm not too big on numbers and stats, I just looked at my journey through it. I remember this is my first website I did in London, and it was like a magazine for housewives online. We had to do that. And we came up with this idea that we would have every day a new image with new typography, just like a magazine, right? We had the content for it. Maybe we didn't have the platforms for it. Like, as soon as we had different fonts and sizes responsive, it all kind of went really off. And that's actually personally when we started to realize, my team and I, that it shouldn't just look pretty. We should also look into how it works. Why did you ask? Why did we realize that? Well, at the same time, like, iPhone became, you know, everybody started having the iPhone, together with a shit ton of quotes from Steve that was telling or reminding us that design is not just how it looks, but also how it works. And that's where we were like, okay, so it shouldn't just be pretty, we should know how it works. But then we also realized that to know how it works, we should see how people use it. But to know how people use it, we should look into how people live. Because people interact with these things not just in a vacuum, they're connected with all of the other things that, you know, touch their lives, right? Customer journeys or the whole service blueprint, we could say. So to summarize, what I've seen on my skin, literally, this is very dark. The focus of my craft sort of moved from very visual to also considering how something works and to also consider how people use it. And like, it's been a big shift, you could say, especially if we consider that it happened in less than 10 years, right? It's a lot to take on. And the other thing is that here I present it nice and linear, but we all know that has been very chaotic for not only for designers, but, you know, for companies, customers. Suddenly we were overwhelmed by all of these new things. And I found this, I really like this, shows a lot of what goes on into putting out a product or a service. And, you know, even though I completely agree with this, what I've seen that this meant, businesses started wondering, okay, I still have the same budget I had a few years back. Where should I spend it first? What's the most important thing here? Because I'm told that everything is important. So if I want to launch something good, I have to have all of this stuff in check. So I got to play some prioritization, and I'm not quite sure which one to start from. I've seen something happening to my network, right? All of my contacts on LinkedIn became UX designers, and it's great because sort of. But to me, it's a side effect on. I want to be doing everything because I'm told being the unicorn is what positioned me good. I can't do all of that myself, and most worryingly, I think also, you know, when I interview people that is about to go off from school, they don't know exactly what they want to be, right? So when I ask them, so what do you want to do? And they tell me, I want to be a UXer. I was like, but what does that mean? Like which, like how? And nobody seems to still know exactly what direction they want to take. So while we were trying to figure out who we are, what we do, and what we want to do, and so on, one thing hasn't changed, right? One thing kept going linearly, and that's time. We couldn't really wait. Time doesn't wait on us, right? So if I have to look strictly at my part of the job, which is mostly, the visual side of things, when back in the day I had like 2 weeks, you could say, to do my job, my new website, my new solution. Now, that time is sort of start being fragmented into, now I just wrote some main ones, right? Don't take this too strictly. But there's a whole, to do a job properly, there's suddenly a lot of stuff that has to be done before actually sort of arriving to my end of the journey, right? That's when I start finalizing and so on. Well, translated into time, that basically means that if, 7 days for all the other guys to do things, then when my turn comes, is roughly always 3, 2, 4, depends, but it's always around that amount of time. And when I start really thinking about what do I need to do in that amount of time, it's kind of a loads of things, right? Even just, I got a new client, got to do this, just find the brand guides from the client. That takes me easily half a day. Send the mail, wait for it, ask. If we've worked with that client before, go on the server, find, ask, the guy quit, like half a day. And find and install a font, find inspiration, try options, get them approved, design the states for the buttons and all that, responsive. Motion and transitions, because we want to make it really nice. Then update the style guides and then upload it. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to figure out that takes more than 3 days. And again, like, I don't think I've listed anything out of, even if it's a small scope, even if it's a small project, I'll have to do, those are sort of ABC of what a designer does when working. So how do you do it? How do I think designers have been doing it, at least? By being approximate, right? Approximation is it's a very good tool because it allows us to go very fast. It's not exactly, but yeah, it'll do the job. And if it goes fast, it's good. Costs us less money. We can sort of fit it in the time we have. Facebook internal mode, right? Move fast, break things, bam, go. And I don't know. I'm a designer by heart, I would say, and for me, design is about simplifying and solving problems, right? And I don't know, but you can't just approximately solve a problem. Either you solve it or you don't solve it, right? And being approximate is, showing or doing something that is similar, but not quite the same. So here's my new trend, or I don't know. Here is an invitation to stop feeding this trend about being, approximate when we do design, right? And I brought the proof for this. It's not something I just made up. If you take my field of UI design, all the websites from all of these big guys, they basically look the same. Even the 2 big banks, right, in Denmark. So I'm like, that's similar, but not the same. Can you see? In products, right? First, they put all of these devices in our homes, and then, by the way, we're listening. Like, they've been sloppy, not clear, or not direct, right? Somebody at some point took a, it's about failing and failing fast. Yeah, but when you're Facebook and you fail, the 1% of users you have, it's like 20 million or something. 20 million of people gets a fail. And if it's Facebook, maybe, it's your picture in Angover that gets published. But what about when it's your pension or when it's, savings you saved for all your lifetime or banking? Like, can't just fail. Sorry, I have to fail so I can learn. I think there is something we have to be careful about because we always take we always take this big example. I mean, I do at least, Airbnb, but they operate in holidays. I work with pensions. Again, as I said, for me, it's really important at this. The sloppiness or the approximation doesn't stop at UI design, as I showed. It also, the new Macs. Like the charger of the new Mac doesn't fit with the new iPhone. Oddly enough, it fits with an Android phone. So I'm like, no shit, that now suddenly we have to design for the trust, transparency, and be clear and all that. Like, all of this thing of moving fast and breaking things, I'm not sure is giving us back what we expected. And even more funny, yesterday at this stage, I had to go to the barber to look nice for the presentation, and I sat waiting, and I opened LinkedIn, and the first article I've seen is this from Harvard Business Review saying that why move fast and break things doesn't work anymore. So I was like, cool, this is on track with it's definitely something people are talking about now. It's not just in my head. So, yeah, so this is a little bit my take on what's going on now, right? And I hope it starts a conversation, or starts a niche in your head. I think it's important. This other part of the talk, I wanted to show you what is my take on what we could do, right? So I'm a designer, so what I do in my day-to-day, what could I do in my day-to-day to start changing this or doing it better? Well, clearly, I cannot change the time, but what I can do, at least, I can change the way I use it, right? So I brought you an example. This is pretty hands-on. Some of you, actually, I think, already seen it, but it's the sort of framework I use with my team, and it's pretty specific, so bear with me. I hope I'll make it very digestible. Look at just how we build an interface, right? Like imagine a dashboard, or in the instance I'm bringing you, some sort of smart banking for young generations, whatever, right? So I put down with my team this sort of logic of levels, where at the ground floor of a brand, you have sort of the values that drive that brand, and the tone of voice. In this instance, you could say it's a smart finance for young generation, and the tone of voice, therefore, has to be easygoing and simple, right? That's the soul, is what's inside. We go one level deeper or higher. You got the face of the brand. This is a random logo, but the logo, right? It's what we look at when you meet somebody. It's a face of a brand. Then we start looking at the rest of the body of the brand, level 2, right? You got the main colors, the typography that identifies that brand, and the main shapes. Is it round? Is it square? Is it outline or whatever? And here, start playing a little game, which is by adding all the things that I showed you, I can start building what's underneath. So level 3, iconography, patterns, and imagery, right? You can see things start to make sense. Does this make sense? Excellent. By adding these things, I can start digging into digital elements, obviously, right? I have enough information to start designing my first digital elements, like buttons, input fields, lists, and so on. Following the same logic, one level deeper, I'll have my cards, my modules, big blocks start taking shape, and then ultimately, thank you, coffee machine, at the last level, I have like my pages, my templates. This is Atomic Design extended to branding. I didn't invent this. There's a book called Atomic Design by Brad Frost speaking about this. But if you'd have to summarize what I think really is really cool and very precise and not approximate, is that we acknowledge there's a design phase going on that starts from the very inner soul of a brand and goes all the way through digital. And when things start being interactive, you can start talking about interaction design. And when things start doing a job, you can start talking about the experience those things together create. Why I think this is really relevant and to stop being approximate? Because, no matter what kind of designer I am, I can just go up and down this graph and find my answers by looking at. So if I have to pick a typography for a brand, I will look at what sits above, and I will consider what has that typography to be applied to. So I don't best guess, or I don't make something new. I try to stick to the script. I brought you an example. It's the design of our new website. Not all of it. I'm just going to talk to you about one section. Some of my colleagues know about this. But basically, the biggest task we had when we had to redesign our website was to introduce our services, right? And we are a big company now, and our service, that's the document I received. We are a big company of 4 different units that join together. And suddenly we have to explain to people what we do. And inside each one of these, we call them practices, there's what we call service domains. And inside one service domain, yes, somebody says there's a service. Exactly. So the overview looks like this. So that was, I was like, okay, I don't have much time. I have to design something relevant, and I have to make it, has to make sense, can't be approximate, has to be precisely on point. I read this quote. I'm a bit of a design system geek. Who's not these days? But this quote that I don't remember who said, it actually states that we should, when we approach something, we should stop adding new components to design systems. So every time I have a need, bam, add something. We should start at least by understanding completely what goes on in the systems behind those components, right? So truly know what you have before you actually add complexity. So I sort of fetched back my framework, and I laid out what I had about our brand. And what I had about our brand had our value proposition, I had our tone of voice, I had our logo type, I have our colors, and I had our typography. What I missed completely was the whole digital area. And I tried to think, right, what do I have? Let's start from the colors. And I thought, how much do I know about the colors we have? Not sure. I have just that slide there that shows me, but I don't know how to use them. I don't know the system behind it. So I designed a small fictitious module with a big quote, an icon, some text, and I started throwing at it colors. First, the primary colors. I was like, oh, it looks good. Some things start looking really nice. Some things are really bad. But then I started thinking, what about the rest? There's secondary colors, and then the grayscale. And then that day I ended up exploring 486 combinations manually out of 600. And that's the whole thing, how it looks like. Has been an adventure in itself, but the real point here is that it gave me a chance to learn things about our brand colors that I didn't know before. So suddenly, before I had an uncertainty, now I knew something more that I could use, but it wasn't enough, right? This was just half of what I had. I wanted to explore also the rest. I'm not a typography designer, but I don't think it takes a typography designer or anybody too specific maybe to figure out that our font kind of looks like Helvetica bold. So all I had to figure out, I made a test. So you can see it's basically comes across the same. So all I thought is like, okay, but who's great at Helvetica then? If I find out how they use it, then maybe I can use it. So obviously, Swiss, they invented it. So they know how to use it. And then, the city of New York, all of their wayfinding is designed using Helvetica bold. And here I had my epiphany. I thought, if the Americans managed to explain people how to navigate New York with that, then for sure I should be able to find a way to explain people how to navigate this. And suddenly these 4 blocks became 4 colors. And inside each color, I pulled some of those, iterations of the main colors. So I could find something that identified specifically each practice, but sort of fragmented the services underneath. So when you go into one, and then you click into one, you land on a page which is entirely branded as the box you just clicked. So I sort of found a narrative, right? A logic that goes from homepage to the practice page and then the service domain. Make sense? Yeah, okay. All of this long-ass explanation to say that if we go back to that, I suddenly managed to add elements in this area. So therefore, filling the gaps has been a fun exercise because I had so much truth down there, and that sort of helped me finishing the website, right? So, last 5 slides. Here's my trends, or here's my trendy conversations, or whatever you want to call them. Keep this stuff in mind. The first thing is designers shouldn't design in a vacuum, right? I still don't buy this, I'm a brand designer, I'm a digital designer, I'm a UX designer. There's no point. We're creating systems to allow any sort of designer to move coherently. So therefore, you could argue that if I have a digital problem, I also have a brand problem. But if I have a brand problem, I also have a digital problem, right? This explained it. So there's, like, at the end of this, there's one product coming out. And the customers, they don't care whether I went to one company to get the logo and the style guides, and then I went to another company to get the website, and then I went to another company to do the app. Customers don't care about that. There's only one customer experience that put it all together. So we have to find ways to stop with these divisions. We have, as designers, but also businesses, have to acknowledge that there's, it's written everywhere, yet maybe I work with a client, and the client has different departments. I work with one department, we do a great solution for that department, and then when I say, okay, what about that, which clearly makes sense into what we're doing? Oh, no, that's another department. So basically it's just gonna make sense here, and all the rest is just gonna be approximate. So I think it's a joint effort here, right? It's one learning curve for us, but also it's a teaching sort of journey we have to go through with our clients. Where this line, now it's about digital design, but shouldn't exist, right? We all agree to this. Thank you. That's it.